You're listening to the EdTech Startup Show, and I'm your host, Gerard Dawson. Today, my guest is Kelly Smith, founder and CEO of Prenda School. Kelly, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Gerard. It's good to be here.
Sure. So I thought I'd leave it to you to basically give the overview of what your company does. And then within that, I think there's a lot to talk about. So people ask you what your company is all about. What do you say?
Prenda helps people run microschools. So these are groups of 5 to 10 K through 8 students. They meet together in an informal space like a house, a conference room, an extra classroom in a community center, something like that. And they do school together. It's a new version of education. It's tends to be really engaging, lots of creativity, working in groups to solve problems and build projects, but also very strong on academic progress. Kids are working at their own pace in personalized computer software to learn, math and English and all the things that you would expect a child to learn. They're doing it as part of an overall culture of loving learning and taking accountability for their own, their own education. They're typically run by, we call them learning guides. This is an adult that, could be a parent of one of the kids in the class or someone else that's very vested in the community. These people tend to be just gifted with kids. They're able to unlock and understand the genius and the potential in each of these, 5 or 10 children. And in the process of that, learning really comes alive and they have a great experience there together.
Yeah, so you're saying it's first we have, the micro school, and then we have this, within that is an approach to learning and education too. So I want to dive into those things. Sure. I did want to ask you, so somebody who I know you've done some tutoring and teaching and some of those experiences that led you to starting Prenda School, but you were not a traditional teacher before, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I've always been interested in asking questions. I mean, I have memories of being 8 years old and asking my dad about the motion of a ball rolling across a table. And he told me about this thing called physics. And I wrote down in my my third grade, diary, like, someday I'm going to go to college, major in physics, and that actually is what I ended up doing. And my favorite job in college was I worked as a teaching assistant. I would, walk around with this vest, had the word physics embroidered on the vest, and people would come into this big room and they would ask questions, and I had my whiteboard marker and I'd help them solve problems. And the thing I loved most about that was this puzzle of not the problem, because I was doing the same homework problems over and over again. You'd imagine a whole room of people doing the same assignment, but it was this quest to see if I could get them to understand it and to care about it. And the best days for me were moments where, somebody turned to me and they were like, "That's pretty awesome." Yes, that is awesome. It's incredible how this works. So that whole project of kind of unlocking a human to understand something new. I did a lot of one-on-one tutoring, both as a kind of a side job and as a volunteer. So I spent a lot of time in that. And I had done a whole career after leaving MIT. I did nuclear physics at MIT, and then I went and worked in a bunch of technology jobs. And during, after all of that time, I started this code club here in the public library. So I just kind of put posters up in a neighborhood and said, come to the library, learn how to make a video game. And kids started showing up. We had these great learning experiences together because they were able to build projects. And I was there kind of as just a coach, like a facilitator, a mentor, trying to help them care about it and help their imagination, open up and build whatever it was that they dreamed of building. You saw kids that came and wanted to solve really hard technical problems, or somebody wanted to make a website for the club that they were doing at school, or somebody wanted to make a fun game that their friends could play. And for what was fun about it for me with coding was, in in all of these things, the power is in you, right? It's like, what do you want to make? And once they decide that and realize that they're capable of it, then it's just a matter of gaining the skills and practicing and making a million mistakes, but fixing it each time and getting to the point where you have something that actually works. So to watch that process go, so it's in some ways you could say that's an unconventional path to education. In other ways, you might say it's exactly what education was meant to be from the beginning, which is human beings recognizing that there's this gift that they carry around on their shoulders, and to unlock that and to sort of activate it for their own happiness and success, whatever that looks like for them. That's really what gets me going. That's what I find motivating and exciting, and that's what I love doing with microschools.
Yeah, I just want to underline that we need more nuclear physicists working in education for sure, and with that passion that you're describing. So that's cool to hear about some of your.
I know a lot of nuclear physicists, and I'm not sure you want them all working in education.
Okay.
Great people, but they've made different decisions to align to their passions and interests. For me, it wasn't the right. I spent hours and hours in this laser lab alone. I found myself talking to my laser after a few hours, like literally trying to have a conversation with this far infrared carbon laser system. And I look back at that and I'm like, between that and then sitting in the computer lab, writing code to process data results, it's just it was great. It was interesting and there were hard problems to be solved, but for me, it didn't do it, right? For me, it's about connecting with the human being and finding that. But that's not to say that my way is better. The world needs all of it, and what I'd love to do, hopefully as an educator, is to help each person figure out what that is for them and recognize that they not only can do it, they should do it. And that by doing it, they're going to improve their own life and that of, lots of other people.
So through what Prenda School does and through what I'm hearing now, real learning and having kids care about learning are things that are important to you. I want to go back to something I read that you wrote, and maybe you stand by it, maybe not so much anymore, but you said, I got good grades through, and this was in a Medium post, I got good grades through high school and college, realized in grad school that I had no experience or skill with real learning. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, the moment where I realized that was I took a test the first couple months of MIT. It was a class called magnetohydrodynamics. So it's like fluid equations that govern plasma flows. So a state of matter, plasma is hot enough that the atoms fall apart. So you have electrons moving free of their positively charged ions. So you have these electromagnetic forces, but they also behave kind of like a fluid, like if you had water in a tube or in some sort of configuration. Anyway, it's fascinating, super interesting to even think about today. But I took my test and I remember it was 13 out of 39 was my score. And I had this moment. Not only did I clearly not know the material, and there was math on there that I literally had never seen. So it wasn't like I was beating myself up like, oh, I slacked off or something. It's just there's somehow I was supposed to learn this and I never learned it. It was not only that, it was, I don't actually know how to do that, how to go about really grappling with something difficult. And fortunately, so I had sort of the, call it the moral struggle of other parts of my life. As a young grad student, I was already married. I had a kid while in grad school. So, relationships and parenting. I had done a lot of backpacking in, my youth. So having to continue to walk when you're really tired and set up, camp in the snow and your hands are cold. All of these things that are, really important life skills, but I hadn't ever connected them to sort of my experience in an academic setting. And so that bridge, I fortunately was able to make that bridge, at the 25-year-old or however old I was, 24. But I hadn't ever done it before. And so that was kind of that, it was really a scary moment. And you see it, there's a lot of mental health and even suicide and other really serious things happening at the most elite schools. I think for a while, MIT had some kind of record where you have this identity of I'm smart, right? And I got good grades, so therefore I must be. And all of a sudden you're not smart anymore relative to anyone else. And it can be crushing. It can be really this big challenge, this moment. In retrospect, looking back, it's well, yeah, I was smart and I was fine. And I just didn't know those things yet. Like I hadn't done tensor notation, and I wasn't good with kind of some of the math that describes large quantities of molecules. And so, some of these things that I just like the statistical stuff. So it was like, I just had to learn it, and I did, and I was able to dive in and learn all those things and succeed. But yeah, I guess what was surprising and startling to me about that moment was sort of my identity got shattered. I had to sort of like rethink how I was as a person, and like where was my value and strength as a person. And it wasn't anymore about getting an A necessarily. Obviously, I was getting an F, but I I had to figure out, okay, can I do this? Can I dig in and learn this?
So it's like you had learned resilience in other areas of your life, but you had not necessarily transferred that to your identity as a learner and a student.
That's right, because I didn't learn that in classrooms, right? That wasn't the skill. Sal Khan talks a lot about this fixed mindset versus growth mindset, Carol Dweck, and you can read the books. But one of the interesting realizations that I had about school was that I had a very fixed mindset in a positive way. I got good grades with small amount of effort. I thought to myself, I guess I'm smart, and therefore I'm not going to work hard, right? That was like the logical thing, is like, I can get an A without working hard, so I'm going to not work hard. I had friends in these same classes that were really struggling, to get a C took a lot of work. They had a fixed mindset because it was like, I guess I'm not smart, and so I'm not going to work hard. I'm just going to get D's or whatever. So I was getting A's with a fixed mindset. They're getting G's with a fixed mindset. It really, like, it's the same problem, which is like, if your belief system is tied to this letter on a piece of paper, or some degree that you one day get, then it's really sending you the wrong message, right? Real learning is what do I want to build? What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want to understand? And then doing it. And that I didn't know how to do. And I wished somebody would have like grabbed me by the shoulders, shaken me a little bit, and said, hey, you've got a good head on your shoulders. Why don't you apply it to something that you care about, and start, thinking about what kind of life you can. And this sounds like awful. Like, I've had a fine life. It's not like I have like regrets or something gone terribly wrong. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I've had. Tons of privilege and great things have happened to me. I feel very grateful for all of that. I just look at it as that moment that happened to me much later in life. What if that had happened when I was 8? What if I had this realization that I don't like, grades are irrelevant. Smart or not smart is a stupid question. Don't even worry about it. Just, am I learning? And if I could, instead of optimizing for all these other kind of structural things, what if I had optimized for learning? Where could I have been? Where could I have gone? And what will the world look like if we can offer that invitation to lots of young people?
Yeah, I can totally relate with what you're saying about having the realization later, and one, maybe saying not regretting, but wondering what if we can build that into the early childhood education experience. For me, I wrote about it, actually. It was just as a hobby, trying to learn basic computer programming, and I have a English writing background, so it was very foreign, and just realizing, okay, I don't know any of this, but I am better than I was 2 weeks ago just by trying a little bit. So I totally relate to this.
Yeah, programming is a great way to learn a growth mindset, because if you think of yourself as somebody who has to get it right the first time, like, you'll just quit. Like, there's no way. Nobody gets it right, all the time. You make tons of mistakes, and you have to kind of work through it. So coding's a great example. That's awesome that you took that on.
Yeah, so we're talking about your philosophy around learning and education. Teaching there is implied. So that brings us to the micro school model and Prenda school. Let's say for somebody who's totally immersed only in the traditional world of education. I know they're unique, but also know you've seen many examples of what they look like. So let's pretend I bring my kids to a Prenda school. What's my experience going to be, and what's my kids' experience going to be?
Yeah, so a Prenda microschool, walk in the door, typically between 5 and 10 students. they tend to be close in age. They're often multiple grade levels, but it might be third, fourth, and fifth grade, for example. My daughter rides her bike to a neighbor's house, and there's 10 fifth grade girls that all meet together. They'll start out the day with a kind of a community circle, intention setting. This is what I'm going to accomplish today. Say your goals out loud. There's the sense of kind of shared accountability and supporting each other. This is what's happening for our activities later, what we're going to be doing. And then everybody sets to work. So the first mode of Prenda Day is called Conquer mode. And in Conquer mode, this is about setting daily goals for academic standards. So I have a goal, my daughter would have a goal for math, a goal for English language conventions. Those are both in software tools. She has a goal for reading, which could be, I think she's into the Penderwicks right now. If you have a 8 to 12-year-old daughter, check out the Penderwicks. It's super fun. It's like Little Women, but with a fresh twist. Little plug there for a great book. She'll read a certain amount, and then there's a writing goal, and she can do that, in her notebook with a pencil, or she has a Google Doc that she'll work on. So she sets goals to be sort of exercising those muscles and accomplishing those things every day. For math, it could be, she's working on fifth grade math in Khan Academy, and she's at 53% of the content mastered. And Khan Academy has this beautiful feedback loop where the kid and the parents and everybody else can see, this is what you understand, this is what you don't understand. So let's do these 3 lessons, and that's driven by the student. I'm going to do these 3 lessons, and I'm going to try to move from 53% to 54% mastery. If I move 1% per day for the whole school year, I'll move 1.4 grade levels or something through the school year. So I've gone more than what what's traditionally expected of me, and beautifully, like, I've really mastered it because it's all personalized. It's not like get a 76 and then move on to the next chapter.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but just when you were talking about the Conquer section you're mentioning, do you have any insight? And sorry, I've spoke over you for a second, but how, like you mentioned, kids advancing at 1.5 grade level, for example, is that happening in Apprentice schools?
That is what we see. There's obviously always a distribution around that. Yeah, that's the middle of that distribution. Kids are moving well over 1 grade level, and we're excited to have more data to support that and be able to put that together. The academic progress, we're obviously watching it. The parents care about it. The guides are looking at it. So we've definitely put effort into being able to see progress. And then importantly, right, we've correlated that for better or worse. What the state really has to focus on is these assessments that come in the spring. And so we feel a high level of confidence that a kid who moves through all of the grade level in Khan Academy, for example, or Lexia or one of these tools actually will be able to sit down and perform well on the standardized test. So those are, I think there's a whole discussion debate. I'm going to hopefully dodge that whole conversation. We don't need to get into it. We do take the tests. We work in partnership with district and charter schools, so this is part of our life. And what we found is that for most parents, it's something that fits with what they want as well. Because it's like, I'd like to know where my kid is, as long as it's not used as this kind of like bludgeon weapon, and my child is coming home, crying because of all the pressure around this test. So we don't do anything like that. It's not in a negative way, but it's, let's take this test, and as a useful indicator of where we at, not with some sort of definitive like finality, like you are a B. It's instead, this is where you are right now. This is what you understand, and let's keep working on it because you'll make progress for the next time. So that's Conquer mode. We kind of focused on that. Collaborate mode is next. This is an hour every day where the whole group will work together on a shared group activities. This could be a hands-on science experiment, something to do with social studies. Kids, will kind of pick a topic and dive in and understand everything, research and teach each other about a topic. There will be group math puzzles, Socratic discussion about a current event, a debate. One of my classes early on, the kids are always in charge of these activities. So we give them the scaffolding and sort of the framework for it, but then they're in charge. And there was a 4th grade girl named Lydia, and she said, she went to our bookshelf and picked out If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, just one of the classic children's books. She said, let's read this book, and then we'll have a debate about whether you should give the mouse a cookie or not. And everybody had to write their arguments about, why. And it ended up being this beautiful, rich, discussion and wonderful time, and hilarious to just think about, like, should you give the mouse the cookie? Anyways, that collaborate activity is, 1 hour, typically in the middle of the day. It involves the whole class, and it's led by one of the kids with the adult guide playing, a coach facilitator role, kind of helping support that student leader in driving that activity. And then finally, create mode is the third kind of academic modality of learning. That's where, project-based learning happens. We have a library of project prompts. Kids will work together in teams of 2 or 3, and they'll build a project together. Younger kids, it might be, okay, everyone, we're going to do this craft. The whole class, everybody's going to work on this craft. In other cases, it's, I had a class early on. My son was, I think, in 6th grade, and he and a girl, I think was a 7th grader. No, maybe they were both. I think he was maybe 5th and she was 7th or something. They decided to write a biography about someone. And this was one of the project prompts. So they found the grandfather of the girl, and they went and did like original research and talked to everybody that knew him in his life and compiled all of it, like actually made, it's tons of work, one of these huge ambitious projects, and they spent, way longer on it than you would ever do for like an assignment, but it got to a point where it became a quest for them and something that they were really interested in. So create mode really unlocking that, giving kids space to, build something and to do something that you're truly proud of. And then I kind of skipped over, but there would be breaks in there. My daughter's class, for example, that rides a bike, they've decided that they're going to work on sort of one sport every week. So it's like a different sport each week. And they have one of the parents comes over and sort of introduces them to the basics of the sport. And they spend time every day, kind of in the middle of the day playing, eat their lunch and play sport or something. That's roughly what the day looks like. And then they'll go home. And again, many of these are happening in a hyper local setting. So it's a walk or scooter ride or bike ride, from where you are to where you live, if you're not having school right in your own house. So it tends to be kind of a natural transition then to the rest of your day as a kid.
Yeah, so we have the conquer, collaborate, and create 3 phases of the day. I noticed another C word that you didn't specifically mention, but you alluded to is curriculum or content, which I could see is a little bit more child directed and kind of woven through an acquisition of skills. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think if you took out a little bit more, then it is definitely more child directed. And a lot of what we've done is tried to take out this sense of kind of sit here and receive your education. I think that's what a lot of us grow up with. And it's like, think this way, or, read these texts, interpret them in this way. There's multiple choice, answers. So there's a right answer. I think so much of what we're trying to do is really work on the process. And thankfully, this is not just us. There's a whole movement in education towards, kind of focusing on becoming a thinker and a learner, as opposed to, memorizing facts and regurgitating them later for a test. So you can see definite progress there, even in the writing of the academic standards as they've evolved over time. So I don't want to make it sound to your readers like we're somehow the only ones involved in this. We're just basically saying, what if we built a structure that just doubles down on it, says, hey, this is about learning, and learning is yours, and we honor that. And here we are to kind of give you just the right scaffolding and support so that you can become that learner that will go on and learn whatever you want, accomplish whatever you want in your life.
Mm-hmm. Right. So speaking of the scaffolding and support, so I can see it's clear, again, there's a philosophy and an approach to education. And then just to make it clear, what as a company are you providing for the families or the directors of the micro schools?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think a lot of it we had to stumble into. There was a lot happening without even conscious thought at the beginning, because it was so much of it was just sort of how I approached learning. And I was there with these 7 kids. And so that became the first microschool. And then the next 2 guides were friends of mine. And there were people that that saw things like I do, and we would be on the phone together. And so there's this kind of piece. It's evolved over time to be, a full process for onboarding, screening for safety, sending supplies, training, support, all the software, curriculum, and everything's in there. So the full package, so that this learning guide, their real job is to do the hard work of connecting with those kids, being that adult in their life that extends the invitation for them to care about learning, and then does it in a consistent, loving way over. Sometimes it takes, lots of repeated attempts. Well, kids are humans, and so it's a messy process. It's the beautiful, messy, challenging, and rewarding work of doing that. And we try to then be there for those people and give them everything they need, including getting paid. So there's the way we've worked together with schools is these schools are, state credentialed institutions. They collect money from the state, and that funding then allows us to pay these microschool guides. So they're, being compensated for the work it's really important work that they're doing.
Just want to make sure I understand that part perfectly. So when you say the schools, do you mean the local other public schools or the micro schools?
Yeah, Prenda's not a school. So we help provide these micro schools, but we'll do it in partnership with a government credentialed, state credentialed institution. So either a district school or a charter school, or in some cases there's other programs that will allow this to work. But we'll go find those
already exist, right?
Say that again.
They were. I just want for myself and for listeners to understand the exact model, how it works. It's for, so let's say it's a school that already exists, and then they will be able to start a micro school.
Yeah. So for example, if anybody listening to this says, this sounds cool, I would like to have micro schools, and I would like to do it with Prenda, what you would do is go to the district or charter school where your kids go, or somebody that you have a contact with. You will say, hey, you could add microschools as an option to as part of a portfolio of what the school is doing. And really, if you listen, especially during COVID, this has become a trend, right? Like, families are different, children are different, needs are diverse. How can we provide lots of optionality so that families can find what they want and what works for them and their kids, and work together? So this becomes part of their kind of overall portfolio as the school. So we will work with those schools, sign an agreement, and then when somebody signs up as a microschool, they are enrolled with one of these schools as an official student of that school. That allows, make sure that there's accountability to all the state requirements and federal requirements that are needed for education, but it also means that that's funded by state, tax dollars that are allocated towards education. And by the way, it costs less to do it this way than it does in a kind of a traditional approach, in part because there's no building, right? We're just meeting in a home. So that that arrangement works. The funding goes, and we're able to, in addition to kind of supporting and providing all the tools for these microschool environments to happen, we pay the learning guides so they're able to earn some income through the work that they're doing.
Yeah, that's a fascinating model, and I just wanted it to be clear for listeners who I hope then decide to start a micro school, that they
sure
exactly how it works. And just selfishly, I wanted to fully understand. Now, like I believe that lots of experimentation and or non-traditional approaches to education and learning are needed, as I can only imagine all the insights that you've gained about learning and micro schools since day one. Now I can cut this out, but I know that some people are less resistant to that, about kids leaving the school system, or basically, yeah, that idea. Have you encountered any resistance or like objections to this as a model?
That education is, it's stable. It's been around. Maybe stable is the wrong word. It's part of the ecosystem. There was this, since the 1800s, the United States has decided, and it's done state by state, where the assumption is everyone's going to get educated for free as, a service of the government. So we're going to use tax money, we're going to pool it together, and we're going to deploy it so that education becomes available. And for me, that idea of public education, for me and for lots of people, that idea of public education is critical. It's been so important to, giving access and opportunity to lots of people. I think many people have pointed out that that doesn't always work, right? And as things have changed and needs have advanced and the world is changing around it, there's questions of, is this working? And specifically, is this working for my child? And that's so much of what people are asking from a variety of backgrounds and neighborhoods and where they are. Is every parent wants, their child to have the opportunity that works for them, that will set them up for, success and a happy life. So as part of that conversation, there's constantly, ideas, and this is in lots of places, right? Some of it is happening right inside of, you walk to your neighborhood elementary school and you'll meet a teacher there that's doing things differently, that's reading the research, that's maybe a principal that's structuring things in a way that supports a growth mindset. Or you'll find project-based learning is a kind of one of these research-backed, well-supported. There's a lot of places where those ideas, even though well documented, haven't taken off. And so then you'll find other places outside of traditional school where people have started a new school, for example, or done it through a kind of a private model, or done it through charter schools, which is basically still public education. It's offered using the funding from the government, but instead of being like owned and operated by the government, it's owned and it's operated by someone else with funding that comes from the state and available for free then to the families. So this whole ecosystem, and yes, there's lots of there are many opinions and many kind of philosophies and approaches and all this. Frankly, I don't get involved in it. It's not my fight, and I don't have a strong preference of where the money flows and what the organization looks like. What I want is for kids to be empowered as learners, and so what I'm looking for always is, who are those partners out there, those people that want what I want, and how can we work together to offer this to those kids? And when I've had beautiful experiences where people maybe start out with a little bit of that, worry and fear, and what is this about? Is this about money and power and all these things? It's when we can look at it together and focus on serving kids, and especially, those kids who maybe haven't had a great shot in the past, or for some reason things aren't working for them, where we can work together and try to create options for those families. There's amazing coalitions and lots of great work already happening in multiple places that, that's where we get excited. And that to me it kind of transcends some of the fights about this. And it really is about, let's work together to create great opportunities for kids, because every kid, needs to have that. Every kid deserves to have that opportunity to get a real public education. And that's what we're all about.
Yeah, it definitely seems like you have the right perspective to dealing with that, and positioning yourself in that certainly big debate, as you said, with lots of many opinions. So along those lines, one thing that I really love about what you're doing is just this idea of so many different schools operating as they want to under your model, with this Conquer, Collaborate, Create Day, and all of the little learning and innovation that's happening in these micro schools. So it got me thinking about, what's some of the most influential feedback that you've received from the early days? Like, oh, we're realizing that this works better, or we want to do it this way. Can you think of any examples?
Oh, I could pull up. We have a Slack channel. It's like a community of all the learning guides in Prenda, and they're very active on there. So it basically is that kind of constant flow, constant learning from each other. And these people that volunteer to do education tend to be just the right, the level of generosity and openness and sort of willingness to learn. These are learners, in our ecosystem. And so to watch what they do back and forth. I mean, just in the last day, I've seen advice about how to have a conversation with a child who feels discouraged or like incapable or ready to give up on something. How do you, like lovingly, but with firmness, kind of support that kid and help them. And the truth of that, of course, is that every kid's different, so the same thing's not going to work. But then they'll take that idea, go, have the conversation, come back and say, hey, it didn't go that well. Here's what I learned instead. And so then the third person reading it is like, okay, here's one way to do it and another way to do it, and how can I do it? That will work in my situation. But that that behavioral culture side of it, very critical. It's super important. And all the way to, what was I just looking at today? There was something about it was like a note about writing. I wish I had better. I wish I had paid more attention to what it is. But everything from the academics to the the actual like management of the group, to how to run. Oh, people are talking about field trips and what do you do for this, and where do you go out, and how do you give kids more autonomy and let them be in charge without kind of doing it for them, but you don't want them to flounder. I mean, basically every aspect of this is constantly being learned and reinvented and refined all the time, because it's humans, and that's the process. That's what we've all signed up for in choosing to be involved in this really important work of educating young people.
And what about from your role, as maybe any assumptions you made when starting to operate this model and make it outside of, make it more than just your first school? Were there any assumptions you made about how things would operate or how to scale it, for lack of a better word, that you've had to change or alter?
Yeah, like you're asking, like, was I wrong about anything? There's hard to find like anything that I was 100% right about, right? I mean, it's so much of it has changed. I had those 7 kids. I think I kind of alluded to this, but when it was me and 7 kids, there was a lot that I was doing kind of subconsciously, just sort of me. But an example of this is just overall like volume, what a teacher would call classroom management, right? It's just me and 7 kids, and I know each of them, and we're cool, and I personally feel like I have a good read on kind of interpersonal dynamics. So there were places where people were like annoying each other, and I was able to kind of like mediate, facilitate conversations and help people like solve conflicts and things like that. But I didn't think about any of that as like something to give. And so a couple generations later, we have now these microschool guides, and it's new people that I hadn't met before. I didn't know them at all. And they came back and said, hey, my kids are like ready to kill each other, or they're making so much noise, and we have this one kid that has some sensory issues and wants it to be quieter. And what do you do about that? And it's like, oh yeah, well, I did have to solve for that a little bit. And like a lot of the learning from the first semester, I actually did 3 semesters in a row. So those first 3 semesters, I got a lot of runway, but I didn't see everything with those kids. And so having to continually revise my model and learn from new experiences. But yeah, a lot of the core insights around, can a child be trusted with ownership of their education? A question like that, I feel more confident now than I've ever felt in my life, right? I would have said that was a penciled in hypothesis, like yes. Now it's a screaming Sharpie, yes. And in fact, I wouldn't do it any other way, right? The degree to which a child lights up and the sort of gusto with which they approach things, it's so different, night and day different than how I approached assignments that I had in school, which was, what's the minimum amount of effort to get an A on this, this assignment? And that's just, it's a totally different thing. And so seeing that now over and over again in all these different settings and environments, yes, there's challenges, and yes, there's lots more and lots new that we need to learn and apply. And we're reaching new communities now that we've never reached before, and it's amazing. But like that underlying, can kids be trusted with their education? Yes, they can. Please trust them with their education. If you're listening right now and wondering about your own children, can they be trusted? Yes, but it's, it takes some work. And I always recommend the book, The Self-Driven Child, as a great sort of read for parents who are kind of contemplating this but don't know how to do it. There's a lot of really useful, practical advice in that one about how to think about this. But Prenda, the whole idea is let's create that space and the scaffolding for that kind of safe zone. You think of it almost as driver's ed course or something, where it's like, we're going to give you the keys. We're going to create a safe environment for you to build this habit and this skill of learning and owning your own education.
Yeah, just looking at the clock. Do you have a hard
No,
stop?
I'm good.
Okay. So, whether somebody already knew about microschooling or is learning about it during this call, it's clear that, that 2020 was a year for this sort of rethinking and reimagining what school and learning can be, between, COVID leading to school closures and remote learning, parents deciding to keep kids at home, et cetera. So I'm curious, kind of open-ended, what was it like for you running your company through this time? What did you learn and experience?
Yeah, I think the best way to put this is 2018, I started that first microschool in my house. By January 2019, we might have had 30 kids, 30, 40 kids doing it. It felt like kind of a small, lively, energetic, but small group of kind of visionary thinkers, people who are willing to kind of adopt something early and make a leap. A year after that, so end of 2019, January 2020, it was in the hundreds. It was 700, 800 students that were doing this. And so this huge growth, it was exciting for me to see that there's a lot of parents looking and thinking about things differently. One of the things that we're really doing, I think that's maybe new in education, is inviting parents to be a participant in the process in a way that they haven't been able to be before. And so really creating a space for them to really, just contribute significantly. So that had all happened pre-pandemic. 2020 starts, and probably there was a conversation early in the year of 2020, before I had heard about Wuhan or anything, where I might have said to a friend or a relative, explaining microschools and what these are and how they work. And I might have said something like, yes, this seems maybe strange right now, but there will come a day where this is a very normal, accepted kind of mainstream approach to education. It's just one of the options that people do with their kids. And, they probably rolled their eyes or something. And that was the end of the conversation. And I thought of that day, honestly, in my head, 1 year ago, I would have said that day is 10 years out. It's going to be a while before before that happens, because, parents care about their kids, and there's a lot of fear, and there's, you're going to take it slow to make sure that you feel confident in this. I think what happened in 2020 was it just changed the whole conversation. It was like, oh, well, what is school? Like, why do we send our kids? What are they doing there? Like, how are they learning? And so many, worksheets got sent home, and Zoom calls happening around at your kitchen table, and parents are kind of watching, and they're seeing disengagement. They're seeing maybe some of the challenges that they had maybe wondered about before, but they wouldn't have really dived in completely. And so now you have this world where everybody's, suddenly kind of re-examining everything, asking questions. It's not to say that things don't go back to normal, and I actually really hope it does. We need the vaccine, and love to see everybody settled happily with the school that works for them. But I did notice that there was kind of a shift in the market adoption of microschools, and that people that felt very hostile to microschools, I would never do that, that's so weird, they're kind of like, yeah, they're neutral, they're like, that's a reasonable option, like, I get why people do it, it's not for me, still fine. And then the people that were kind of there, we're at the neutral part, are signing up. They're like, let's go, let's do this. And they're seeing the incredible results. And again, this is not for everyone, but the main benefits of this is, parents who really they want to see their kids engaged. They want to see their kids love learning. They want to see their kids develop as a self-learner, somebody who's able to chart a course for themselves and be creative and take that ownership. And so for those parents, Maybe before it was like, oh yeah, that'd be nice, but this is convenient. Now it's like there's not like a convenient alternative, and let's give this a shot. And now that they've given it a shot, many of them just great experiences and staying with it over time. So that general trajectory, of course, it happened much quicker. And I just want to get on the record that I am firmly anti-pandemic. I'm not like happy about COVID. It's maybe a silver lining that it's changed the way that people think about education, and I hopefully for the better. Right, you have kids now that are having maybe a more engaging learning experience than whatever they were doing before, and that includes lots of different things. So it's not about one system or one building in particular.
Sure. Yeah, you were not taking advantage of the situation, but simply there was a new emerging need that was certainly addressed by what Prenda School is doing.
Right.
So we've alluded to a bunch of examples, but I'm curious if, just to help make it once again concrete for people, what are maybe some of the more unique examples of micro schools, either setting or topics covered, just the things that stick out to you where you say, wow, that's an awesome version of what I've brought into the world.
There's so many places where I just feel nothing but gratitude to be part of this. We have a microschool, for example, in the San Carlos Apache Reservation. It's in eastern Arizona. I got to go out there a couple of years ago when we were first talking about this. San Carlos is a rural area. It's low income. There's a lot of challenges in San Carlos. The school has not been like performing high academically, in addition to kind of some safety concerns, and really it's been public knowledge, I think, for a lot of people that maybe if you can find something else, get to one of these other places. So against that backdrop and tragic backdrop, and by the way, that's not indictment on anybody. There's a lot of kind of structural problems that lead to a situation like that. There was a family that approached us, and this family runs a church in San Carlos that had an empty classroom in the back. And they said, we would love to, some of the people we know through our community would really benefit from this. We would love to create a microschool right here in San Carlos. And so I got to go. We had an open house. We publicized. I don't even know how they got the word out. I think we put it like on the local radio, and there was somebody, one of the family members, sat at a table outside of the grocery store and like handed out pieces of paper, like, come learn about this new option. We got to meet these families, and I had this moment with this girl named Selena that it just stuck with me because I knew kind of some of the background, I knew some of the situation. She doesn't have parents at home, lives with kind of an older relative, but clearly bright. You can tell that this girl, like in a lot of ways, it just felt like just so exciting to see her potential and who she is. And I sat down with her, I showed her, just kind of giving her the overview. Here's how the projects work. Don't you think that'd be exciting? Here's how the collaborate activity every day, and you could lead an activity. Kind of said, well, what do you get excited about? And she's like, well, I really like math. I showed her Khan Academy. She had never done Khan Academy before. And I said, basically the way this is going to work is like, here's fifth grade. I think she was a fifth or sixth grader. Here's, your grade level in math. And you start answering questions, and the computer's going to adapt to what you know and what you don't know. And you're going to get to a point where, you're just learning one thing after another and mastering it. And eventually this number goes from, 0% mastered to 100% mastered. And I showed her how the system worked, and I gave her the chance to kind of answer a few questions, and she was really shy, really quiet about it. After a little bit, she saw kind of what I meant and how the number changed. She kind of was like, dude, you could see her kind of calculating. And she said, so you're just saying I could just learn math, like whatever I want? Like I could just keep going? And I was like, yes, like exactly that. Like imagine you're not waiting for anyone. It's like, here it is. Here's math, Selena. Like where do you want to stop? And it's really like, keep going, because calculus is in there, multivariable calculus, like differential equations. You could learn any math in the world if you just knew and believed that you're capable of it and you had the skills of a learner. And Khan Academy is one resource, but there's lots of places that you can go if you have an internet connection and some time. And and then it was like, call me if you need any help. But she has a learning guide, and she's been able to make incredible progress. And so being able to kind of see that, it's just that first spark, and going from that spark then to a life, hopefully a life of learning. It's thrilling for me. It's so exciting. I can talk all day about other ones, but maybe I'll just stop with that one for now and see if you have any other questions.
No, that's awesome. Just, yeah, showing in that example, showing a kid what's possible that she might not have seen before. That's awesome. Um, well, yeah, that was the last question I had planned, but I would like for you to just share for people who are now uh, sold on micro schools, or at least want to learn more about what you're doing. What would you suggest to listeners?
Please reach out. So if you're in Arizona, and we're also working with on a limited basis in a few other states, Colorado, Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas. So if you're in one of these places, please reach out and let's work together. We can get you set up and start a micro school. If you're somewhere else, let's work together to find schools that we can partner with. And we have now a team that's what they do, is they talk to administrators and leaders of different schools and introduce the concepts, and then and we can work together to bring this learning model to not only your kids, but the kids in your community, people like Selena that I just talked about, that can really benefit from a structure that allows them to love learning and to own their learning. So yeah, please reach out. Apprenticeschool.com. You can find all the information, and we hope to hear from everybody.
Awesome. Well, Kelly, some of my favorite, reasons for interviewing people like you is just getting a little glimpse of what is possible now and in the future. I feel like we've definitely helped to create that today. So until next time, everybody, I'm your host, Gerard Dawson. You're listening to the EdTech Startup Show, and Kelly Smith from Prenda School. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
You bet.
All right.